So today we're looking at the Handgun Burst DPS. Now, before we get started, kind of need to do a disclaimer because the Handgun's Burst DPS is incredibly unrealistic. For example, Hellfire, for example, is able to outperform basically any two weapons that you pick simultaneously in the game, and this is just because it has a very large AoE damaging area with that stupid bomb that it drops, and assuming you can get like 20 enemies in there, then at that point it's basically unbeatable. Like nothing even comes close to comparing. But obviously getting 20 enemies in this location is going to be a problem. So don't read too much into this. I am testing these against single target only, which is also going to be unfair because Enigma exists. Anyway, let's just crack on with it, just to show you their single target shot for shot burst DPS. Don't be too excited by this is very unrealistic like I said. So we've got Starshot, Hellfire, Enigma. Don't hate me just yet, this is only taking into account one target. Enigma hits multiple. Nebula, Rune Pistol, Rusty Repeater, Repeater Pistol, Cube Gun, Sorrow, MP60R, Tech 22, Rupture Cannon, Silverback Model 50, Meridian, Service Pistol, Western Classic, Bolt Driver, Double Barrel, and obviously Sure Shot. Now, like I said, this is essentially just assuming single target, not activating any of their buffs, and if any of them have any special perks, such as Enigma's Overload, they are also not equated in. So I then went about testing each individual handgun, mainly the boss ones because they're only the ones that really have like particular little perks and quirks, and then just re-evaluated basically everything, which led me to this. So, starting the list off, we have Rune Pistol, which basically gets nothing, despite the fact that it is technically a boss weapon. Rusty Repeater, Repeater Pistol, the MP60R, Tech 22, Rupture Cannon, Silverback, Service Pistol, Western Classic, Bolt Driver, Double Barrel. Nebula is a weird one, which we'll have to go over in more detail in a bit. Enigma, again, this is a weird one, we'll have to go over again in more detail. Sure Shot, Cube Gun. The reload is the overheat cooldown. It's quite a strange weapon to use because although it only has like a 5-round mag, it's essentially infinite ammo as long as you don't overheat. Meridian, Starshot, Sorrow, which is actually really amazing. You can pull 10 arrows out at a time, so if you get all 10 arrows in, each arrow will do 90 damage, so activating the mod is 900 damage. The actual burst DPS of the shots isn't much, but the pulling out is where all the damage comes from, which is also kind of the same deal in terms of mod uses with Hellfire. The flamethrower itself is really, really bad, but the mod on it, especially because of how large that AoE is, especially the damage that it can do, is a little bit ridiculous. Now, with this being said, there are two outliers, and that is Nebula and Enigma. And the reason for this is one, we all know Enigma is able to hit multiple enemies at once. Calculating this burst DPS so far has essentially just been one enemy with just your normal shot damage with it not spreading. Then obviously Enigma will also do overload, which was the second spreadsheet, calculating the overload into it as well as the mod damage. We now have the absolutely amazing task of going over just how much this is able to do, hitting up to 4 enemies, because that is its maximum cap with its change. It can only hit a maximum of 4 enemies, along with the fact that all 4 of these are going to be proccing overload as well, and if you're really sneaky, you can also proc the tether on these, giving you even more damage, especially considering you can actively tether weak points. And in a similar vein, with Nebula, what if we have all of our damage on a single target? That is the mod as well as all of the corrosive or acidic procs on a single target. How much will we then get? Now, with the previous sheet, like some things like Starshot, it's building up to get the mod, firing the mod off. This is like where Starshot basically excels. Like the actual weapon itself is pretty bad, but that mod is devastating. Sorrow is also kind of in this vein. Meridian is just powerful regardless, but it's quite slow, and if you don't hit your shots, you either have the opportunity to kill yourself or just do nothing. There's no you can't exactly readjust with Meridian. You need to be able to hit your shots very consistently, which is why there's not going to be too much more going into this, simply just because, I mean, how do we go about calculating the overall performance of Nebula? It's just absolutely ridiculous. This weapon is just insane. So, this sheet, as you can see, Enigma and Nebula have basically just jumped to the bottom. And this is literally Enigma hitting 4 targets with all of the targets proccing overload as well as being tethered. So that 3,364 DPS isn't single target. That's essentially, your single target will be divided by 4 essentially. Although not accurately, simply just because for every single time Enigma jumps to another target, you lose a bit of damage. I think it's 30%. So the overall performance of Enigma is it's not in question whatsoever. Just single target, it is bad. In a group, it is absolutely devastating how powerful this weapon actually is. And then this kind of the same vein with Nebula, but this is literally all single targets. So this is how much DPS do we have when we proc the mod on it. Let all, is it 6 or 8 of those weird buzzy things slam down on one enemy while we are actively shooting. So we're getting the mod damage, us shooting damage, as well as the acidic damage overall. This works out to be pretty much, in terms of overall performance, the highest single target DPS in the game. Is actually nuts, especially considering that the mod on Nebula is capable of critting. And speaking of which, this is actually the part where both of these weapons fall short. Although Enigma can crit, it does come with negative 10%, however it is unable to hit weak points. This is the same with Nebula, it is unable to hit weak points. Those crits and weak point hits you can potentially see me getting are just from the mod. The weapon itself cannot crit and also cannot hit weak points. This is going to be their biggest downfall, especially considering things like the Silverback, the Western Classic, Sure Shot, even the damn Service Pistol. These all have a 105% weak point damage. If you would like to know what that means, it means they potentially are able to completely double their DPS. And depending on what other things are then laid into this, simply just because of where Enigma and Nebula can't have weak point damage, and Nebula can't get crits outside of the mod, as well as Enigma is going to struggle to get crits. Depending on the mod they have, as well as the mutator, these weapons can very, very quickly catch up. Now, Enigma at this point is, and I do agree, completely undisputed when it comes to just wave clear. However, that doesn't actually mean there aren't going to be better weapons. Nebula, for example, has been my go-to for just running through dungeons, and I literally do mean running through. Like, I don't stop. I don't even stop to aim at anything. I just loose the mod, and the mod takes care of literally everything, and I just keep moving. So there are other options, and it is up to you to experiment. I'm actually a personal fan of the Western Classic. I quite like it. When I'm not using Nebula, I tend to use the Western Classic. Anyway, that is going to be it for this video. Have fun, good luck, don't die. It's bad for the health.